Listen to The Brew for the best classic hits of the 60s, 70s, and 80s. KOKL, Okmulgee, Oklahoma.
SJ, welcome to Mvskoke Radio, your weekly source for tribal and community news, interesting guests and discussions, plus a local events calendar. SJ, Stongo, Gary Fife, Jehojifkados.
Jessica McBride, Jehojifkados.
Darren DeLon, Jehojifkados.
And a happy 2018 to all our listeners. And thank you all for coming back this year. We hope you had a good holiday and survived bitter cold, right? Right, folks? But anybody go out and play in that stuff today?
I didn't actually go out and play in it, but I went to a Thunder game in Oklahoma City for New Year's Eve, and It was cold.
I made like fast 100-meter runs from my house to the car. I mean, that's about it. I mean, I wouldn't go, whenever I had to go pick up Cyan, I would say, hey, just come on. I would text her, come on out here. I wouldn't go knock. I'll wait till it warms up.
Okay. Well, it's a nice quiet one at my house. Few nice surprises for the holiday. Okay, it is going to be cold, so everyone be sure to bundle up. Now, we want to start a program and the new year this year with a little bit of news about our principal chief. He was selected by Oklahoma Magazine as one of its top 5 Oklahomans. He's among the elite, and according to the publisher and editor of the magazine, the recognition honors Oklahomans who enriched the state's fabric through contributions to business, policy, arts, and entertainment, public service, cultural preservation, and more. Now, this is Chief Floyd's second year of his term. On today's program, we're going to be discussing several issues. My colleagues have joined me today. We're going to have kind of a roundtable discussion of the big stories of the past year. And we're going to start off with a recorded statement by Dodie Barnett on one of the biggest ones that hit us right near the tail of the year, and on sexual harassment. Now, I know everyone has been hearing stories of legislators and entertainers and businessmen who have been targeted and charged, or allegations made against them for their conduct in treating their female employees and some male employees. And I was kind of wondering, we've always kind of heard the water cooler talk kind of stuff, and
just talk milling around. I mean,
the rumors flying, and questions being asked about, why are these two managers not here anymore, kind of thing, that stuff. It finally has reached at the point where one of the council members, Dodie Barnett, has made some allegations against the current Council Speaker, Lucian Tiger III. Now, before we roll this piece, I want to let our listeners know that we did contact Mr. Tiger to give him the opportunity to respond. And ever since these things first came to the surface, he has maintained a no-comment stance. And he did say to me on the phone that there was no sexual harassment. But Ms. Barnett's case now has hit the national waves. I saw it today on what was it?
I saw it on Indians.com last week.
Thank you. It was the one that just escaped me. And, of course, other allegations have popped up also in the national news. And a couple of years ago, chief of one of the 5 civilized tribes here was dismissed from office for what turned out to be sort of a rampant kind of thing. But we'll let our listeners decide for yourselves. Now, we are, of course, always ready to give Mr. Tiger the opportunity to make a statement and would welcome his response. But until then, we want to hear Miss Barnett's kind of her case. So let's listen to that first.
I think that it's probably past time that I talked about it. And my intent with being open and sharing this personal story is that I hope it starts a conversation on this campus, and I hope that it brings some things to light, because there are a lot of deficiencies and there are a lot of ways that we as a nation, as an employer, do not protect our citizens or our employees. This particular incident, I was in our office. We have a meeting room called the Chambers, and it leads into where our offices are, where our staff is, and where the speaker's office is. And I was standing about 6 feet in front of the door that comes from the Chambers to the offices. And I was talking to a peer, and one of my coworkers was walking in behind me, and I didn't see him because he was behind me. And whenever he walked by, he slapped my rear end hard enough where it was a noise, and I felt it and it hurt, and it jolted me. And he let out a big woo and kept walking. And, you know, I was stunned. I was embarrassed. I thought, you know, how unprofessional. Why did he think he could do that to me? And at the time, I considered this person a friend. You know, we were social. We would go to dinner together. Our families would interact with each other. And I was so stunned. And I just didn't know what to do. I kind of froze. And I thought, you know, I got to do something about this. So I finished my conversation. You know, the person I was talking to made a comment, and I addressed that comment, and then we finished our conversation, and it was Lucian Tiger. And so after that, I went and I you know, nobody was around. It was just me and him. And I said, look, that was really inappropriate. I don't appreciate it. And you know, you don't have permission to touch me. And I'm really mad about this. I'm very angry. I probably said some cuss words. I don't know, because I was really mad and I was shocked and I was hurt. And he laughed. He laughed at me, and he turned and he walked away. And I was like, okay. I was still very angry. And I thought, I don't know. So this was right before planning session. And in planning session, we're in the Chambers, and everybody's around our table in that room. And so I went into planning session, and Mark Randolph could tell something was wrong. And he looked at me and he said, are you okay? And I kind of rolled my eyes and waved my hand. And because at this particular time, you know, Lucian sat pretty much right across the table from me. And so I was like, you know what, I'll tell you about it later. And so I had another conversation with him later that evening. And again, you know, I said, this is not okay, and I want an apology, and, you know, we need to set boundaries, and you need to know that this behavior is not okay, it's not acceptable, and this is crap. So he said, yeah, okay, whatever. And I left it at that. Whenever I talked to Mark later, he was asking me if I was okay, and I said, yeah, and I was telling him what happened. And he told me then, he said, you know, you need to report this. You need to document it. You need to send an email to Internal Affairs right now, and you need to document this. Even if you don't file a formal complaint, he said you need to document it. And I thought, man, it's just so personal. What do you do? I mean, nobody's used to this training, or to this, nobody's trained for this. Nobody's used to this behavior. When something happens to you, you're not sure how to act, right? I mean, do you shut down? Do you get angry? Do you lash out? Do you quit and go somewhere else? I mean, what do you do? So I told him, I said, well, let me think about it, you know. And then all of those things, right? Everybody's going to know your business. Everybody's going to be judging you. They're going to say, well, maybe you asked for it. They're going to say, well, maybe you wanted him to do that. They're going to get all up in your business. My children will know that this happened, and they're going to be looking at me and at that person who did this to me. And my husband, what is my husband going to say? You know, I mean, my husband would have come up to the office and had some words with him. I know he would have. My husband and I have talked about it since, and he said, yeah, I would have done that. That I'm still angry about it. You know, he's still angry about it now, and this happened a while ago. So there's all of these things that come into your head, and you know, there's no set way. I mean, it's really easy to second guess someone and say, well, why didn't they do this, or why didn't they say that, or, well, she's so outspoken, she would have said something if that really happened at the time, right? Because I can hear y'all. I know y'all are watching, and I know you're thinking of that because I can hear it. So, you know, there's no set way, right? I decided to handle it personally and not say anything about it externally. And that was a mistake. Now I know, now I understand why employers have mandatory reporting. Now I understand why these things can't be tolerated. And you know what? At the end of the day, if I felt like I had been sexually harassed and it had been investigated and we found that there was no sexual harassment, you know, even if it starts a dialogue, right? I mean, there have to be processes. The reason you have processes in place is so that we don't have the emotions, right? We don't have the friendships that interfere. It's the process. You follow the process, and a good process protects our employees, and it protects people who are vulnerable to other people in power or that have power over them. But at the time, I did not feel that internal affairs would take me seriously. And part of the reason I agreed to do this interview is because when I look back at it, if someone in my position is afraid, then how much more are frontline employees afraid? If I'm in a supposed position of leadership and I was afraid that my own peers would not take me seriously, then I know no one else trusts us to handle their investigations. I know no one else trusts us to handle their situations when they're affected by sexual harassment and by sexual assault and by institutional bullying here on this campus.
Mvskoke Media has reached out to Speaker Lucian Tiger regarding the allegations. He has declined to comment. Mvskoke Media has also reached out to the Office of the Principal Chief and did not receive a response before deadline. Visit www.mvskokemedia.com for the full story.
Now, this discussion took place at the end of November, I believe, was it?
Yes, we interviewed Ms. Barnett at the end of November, and we published the story at the beginning of December.
Okay, and this is regarding an event that happened a couple of years back, right?
Yes, Barnett said that the event happened back in 2015, and if you listen to her interview, she kind of says why she didn't report this alleged event. You know, it was never investigated or anything like that. So I want to be careful and say it is an allegation against Speaker Lucian Tiger, but she didn't report it because she didn't feel that she would be taken seriously. In the National Council, when something like this happens, the Internal Affairs Committee, that's who you would report this to. They don't have like a human resource office or anything like that. The Internal Affairs Committee is made up of half the representatives serve on it, and so she would have had to report it to that committee, and that committee would have had to decide whether or not to investigate it.
This is the same kind of path that many of the other cases involving national figures has followed. Events that had been happening over a period of years were reported later on. Mm-hmm. In some cases, like 10 years ago, something, mm-hmm. or even more. But besides those similarities, though, it just sort of strikes you really hard that it's
here.
Yeah, it's here. As I said, though, before, I'm sure we're all aware of rumors and this kind of thing, and some resignations that were kept fairly quiet. That have happened here, so it's kind of now out in the open, and we're waiting to see where we go from here. Mm-hmm. Now, that's near the end of the year, but it wasn't by any means the top story. It was a huge story, but it wasn't quite as well. It didn't fill the agendas. But I don't know. Before we get away with it, from each of you, let's have an assessment. What do you think? Big story, how does it fit with what we do now?
as a big story as far as the tribe, or a big story like on the national sphere, in anything that like connects? I have to say that the change for the Trump administration and how it's going to affect the tribes has been one of the bigger stories this year. And then as far as on our level at Creek Nation, it was an election year, and we saw, of course, Barnett did not run for her seat, and Patrick Freeman. I was trying to remember his first name. Patrick Freeman is the new representative for Creek District, and then we have several new representatives. Actually, I think that's a big story for the nation.
Before we get any further, we've been joined here in the studio with our manager, Sterling Cosper. Welcome. We just ran the Dodie Barnett interview about sexual harassment, and we were just kind of looking at the aftermath, where it ranked with everything else that we did for the year. So, what are your thoughts there? Is it a number one story? Where does it fit?
Yeah, it is a big story. To me personally, I think it's one of the bigger pieces we've done since some of the stuff we were doing around the time our bill was passed in 2015. Anytime you have a piece like that that's talking about the leadership of one of the branches of government, of course it's going to be monumental. And I think what makes it so big is, again, we've got this thing where someone kind of calls into question the other three branches of government, their ability to self-regulate. And of course, us as the fourth estate, that's kind of how we operate and where we step in, where there are those concerns that have been voiced. And so I think it was a very impactful piece. It was focusing on what has now become a national or even international issue, and maybe some concerns about that at our tribe, and just talking to all the involved parties, as is our job, not to make assertions, to try and get answers.
Right. We did mention in a disclaimer that we had contacted Mr. Tiger and offered him an opportunity. Darren, what are your thoughts there first?
My thoughts on that one was how, like we all said, we have to cover both sides of the story. That's what we want to do. And Devaney and Liz, the ladies who covered this, the reporters, man, I commend them for a great job that they did for doing this, and I commend Jessica too. I mean, she guided them to they had to make sure that they got this right, because like I said, I mean, with us being still free press, I mean, we're still just scratching the surface of what we're capable of doing. So I mean, with that, and we got the trying to be able to like I said, just cover all those bases. So that's what I was really, whenever I read it, how it was written, how the interview took place, whenever I watched it, it was superb. I mean, it was really superb. I was really proud of them. Sterling, and you've got a comment, but while you're mentioning that, I think Liz and Devaney did a wonderful job and have begun to really season themselves and get more confident in their job, because this was a big story that you couldn't mess around with. You had to be quite delicate, yet you had to be firm enough to get this information. So.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Honestly, this year is the first year that both of them have kind of taken point on reporting. Liz was a printing tech last year, 2 years ago, something like that. And Devaney, by and large, did a lot of support on the back end for the television show. And here they're doing one of the biggest stories we've ever had in our department. And Jessica did a great job guiding them through the ins and outs of how do you stay neutral, how do you generate a confident piece. And something, I don't know if we've covered this yet, that I'd like for the record, in that piece you'll see there's an anonymous source verifying that they did witness the incident. A lot of people, when they see that as the only verifying party besides the two supposed involved people, is that, well, an anonymous source isn't that kind of flimsy for something this big. Something to keep in mind that our Free Press law also has a SHIELD Act in it that intentionally explains how anonymous sourcing works and how it's addressed. So we do have the right to protect our sources, but in the event of a defamation lawsuit, we could be compelled by court order to reveal who that person is. So we can't just go around and make up sources, nor can we throw in an anonymous source as unqualified to speak to the subject. So I'd like folks to keep that in mind when they're reading that coverage.
And when our listeners and readers and viewers look at our material, I want to continue my crusade saying that nobody affects what we do except our staff. And we discuss these stories in editorial sessions. There is no pressure from the administration nor the council. So people who are still wandering around saying, well, so-and-so, leaned on them and told them they have to do this, that ain't the real story. So let me make that point clear to everybody. And we're proud that we're able to do these kinds of things and give our people the best. Mm-hmm. All right, now let's take a look at the rest of the year. You've mentioned Trump already, environment, land. We still haven't got an assistant secretary confirmed, and the president's remarks regarding Pocahontas. Any thoughts there, folks? We didn't do a whole lot of it here because it was all over the national coverage, but we can't really ignore it. Any thoughts, anybody?
I just, it's one of those things, like you cannot make what happened up for President Trump to stand in front of a portrait of Andrew Jackson and then refer to Elizabeth Warren as Pocahontas for a ceremony involving the Navajo code talkers. Like there's nothing else to say except you cannot make that up, there's some, you would think that someone would have caught, that he was standing in front of the portrait of Andrew Jackson. I know his communications team has had difficulty in even reining him in, and I think their philosophy now is just to let him say and tweet and whatever he wants to do. But it's shock, I guess. Sure.
Well, that's assuming that having the portrait there was an accident.
Well, I mean, we've also seen that he kind of looks up to Andrew Jackson, and I think you kind of did a piece on that, right, Sterling, that he likes Andrew Jackson. And so
as far as I know, there's been no direct equation of his attitude towards Indian policy and how that parallels with Jackson necessarily, any direct verification. But the second, of course, that portrait went up, that called into question a lot of things about how he would handle Indian policy, seeing as he does look up to this past president.
Right.
Well, I'll bring up something real quick on that, too. I mean, and of course, a lot of whenever he did come into office, a lot of Native Americans were skeptical to begin with because of all the past that he had to deal with, especially with going against casinos. He was really, really big on that, and a lot of Native Americans don't forget. I mean, so that was one of and like Sterling said. I mean, it was just like they're skeptical. And I wanted to point that out immediately.
Yeah, now this is all factual stuff, folks. We are not fake news. We did not make any of this up.
Right.
And
like Jessica said, you can't make it up.
No, we don't have to. But I do want to point out that Trump's casino failed and the Indians didn't.
Yeah.
So there you are. Anyway, let's move on now out of the things. One of the bigger stories to hit us later on in the year, towards actually we're doing the tail end of the year back up, was this Murphy versus Royal thing regarding jurisdiction. And I mean, it's huge.
Yeah.
It could mean that, hey, Creek Nation can rule over everything within that 11 county. Now, I also want to welcome Jason Salzman.
Hi.
He was
I'm so glad to be here just in time for the liberal media bashing Trump. It's awesome.
Well, when you sit down with the pinko liberals.
Yeah, right. I got to say though, I'm I'm not against all Andrew Jackson portraits. I like the ones that go in my wallet.
Yeah, the $20.
Yeah, those are fine.
Yeah.
Just don't put them behind the president when he makes disparaging remarks about
or
me.
trade it in for $2.
Yeah.
Well, they tried to change that too.
Yeah. Hey, what happened to Harriet Tubman?
Well, that's just it. Well, we could riff on that.
Come on.
For a second.
Yeah, right? Let's go.
You know, when I was doing the Andrew Jackson piece, I'd kind of thought about that in passing and forgot that that was a thing. Remember, that was an initiative started by Obama's Treasury Secretary.
Right.
So we have no idea what the status of that change is going to be now.
Well, and, you know,
as far as I know,
was a finalist too, right? William Mankiw was a finalist too. That was a big story for us as well. So. Take them off the money.
Anyway, getting back to Murphy v. Royal, we want to look at what we've heard, anything that sort of has or has not developed yet. I think the tribe itself is kind of in limbo as what to do. It says essentially in the ruling that the Creek Reservation was not, quote, disestablished. Unquote. It means it's all res still according to federal law.
Right.
And which brings up a huge amount of major questions, like, you know, who can do what, where, and when, and this kind of thing. And the tribe is kind of waiting to see how an appeal by the state is going to shake out. Now, the state's saying it's going to create huge chaos in the courts, within police jurisdictions, and it's taking it on and on and on, saying they're going to be overwhelmed. The tribe is saying, no, that ain't the case. It hasn't been so far and probably won't be, but we're not going to put out a position yet. There's so many variables that have to be dealt with.
I think the biggest thing on this is the unknown, and that's what some people are highlighting. You know, that Creek Nation is going to take over everything, and it's going to be mass chaos and murder everywhere, and you know, it's kind of a fear tactic because it is there is so many things that are unknown. We don't know exactly how this is going to affect criminal jurisdiction, and we don't know how it's going to affect civil jurisdiction. Does this mean that Creek Nation can collect taxes? You know, and I think it's a huge case, and it has a huge potential outcome, regardless of what the outcome actually is. But you know, there's so many unknowns and so many questions unanswered that, you know, right now, and until the Supreme Court decides whether or not to take on the case, we're kind of at a standstill and just guessing at what the potential could possibly be.
And Jessica brought up a good point, and I mean, she brought up a key word that, and I'm really big on this one. This is the one I kept asking whenever they had that little meeting. It was Attorney General Dillinger was talking. He kept mentioning reservation every time. You know, and then, you know, all this time, you know, whenever we write our articles, whenever we talk about on Native News Today, whenever Jason does that, we mention jurisdiction. We bring that up. And I mean, I should have asked, but I knew Jason had to get to his question too, was like, is there a difference between jurisdiction and reservation? And then also, was Dellinger mentioned this too, was in the Constitution, it does mention jurisdiction. If we're still established as a reservation, will that have to change in the Constitution as well?
The more, I think, what we've heard proper legal semantic terminology is Indian country, and semantics are very important in law. If you go in and read any law, the first thing you see, besides just the summary maybe at the top, is this huge list of terminology. This is what we mean when we say this word, before they can even go in and start writing sentences. Honestly, I don't know. I'm not going to go too far down that road because I'm not a tribal attorney, but we are very conscientious if there is a realm of doubt as to, is this maybe not the best terminology, finding another option like jurisdiction or Indian country just to play it safe. Now, if the Attorney General's office uses reservation and we quote them, then that's what we use.
Mm-hmm. I you know, just to echo a little bit of what Jessica said, I think the main theme that comes from what we've gathered and where we're at right this minute with this whole situation is a wait and see approach. Exactly. They're all taking it. And so, as Darren said, whenever we went to the meeting, which was well attended, So there's a lot of people that really want some answers and to some questions regarding the case and its outcome. And we've actually seen too, I was looking over our analytics on our YouTube channel today, going over some of the views and what people are accessing. And one of the top ones recently, which really warmed my heart, because everybody in this room knows that I get a little bit ticked off whenever our substantial news is kind of overtaken by a picture of a puppy. You know what I'm saying? Like Jessica can tell you, there's so many times I come into the editorial room or the meeting where I'm just frustrated at how people access information. You know what I mean? I look at this shiny picture instead of substantial news and information that they need.
He's very frustrated.
Yeah. So
hang on, guys. Now, what do you guys got against effigy?
Right? Yeah. No.
I don't think folks don't want to worry if they don't have to.
But I looked at that and I saw that a lot of people were looking at the video that had my interview with the Light Horse Police Chief, Robert Hawkins, and the Attorney General. So we're getting both parts of this issue from law enforcement, which the Attorney General himself quoted as saying, law enforcement is at the heart of this issue.
Exactly.
Which I also agree with because of all of the semantics and everything that goes in on it. So
all right, now we're going to...
they're all wondering what
keep
to do.
that thought. We're going to come back. We're going to take a short pause here, and then we'll be back with our roundtable discussion of the top issues of 2017. So please stay with us here on Mvskoke Radio on 1240 The Brew.
Who am I? Am I native? I don't want people assuming things because I'm Indian. I just want to be me. But how do I live in two worlds? Some guys just check out by doing meth. But that ain't for me. Because I see my family, my friends, my drum making, my future. There are a lot of cool things about being who I am. And meth isn't one of them.
Learn more at ncai.org. A message from the Partnership for a Drug-Free America and the National Congress of American Indians.
Hear that? That's the sound of hope being killed by meth. Methamphetamine use is causing huge problems in our community. Hear that? That's the sound of something you can do about it. Events like rodeo, res ball, and family time can help keep kids away from meth.
Talk to your kids. Keep our culture alive. A message from the Partnership for a Drug-Free America and the National Congress of American Indians.
Learn more at ncai.org.
All right. Now, any more thoughts there? Murphy v. Royal, jurisdiction issues, law enforcement. There's some fear that civic cases may be interrupted and things like that.
Well, just going back to tying it to us, I think it's very, very good, especially if you're looking at a government that could potentially recapture even more sovereignty, have more oversight and power, that you have a free press. And I think it's very good that the tribe set us free 2 years ago before this happened, first of all, to cover this case in the first place. And with the potential of jurisdiction expanding, that you have that healthy government in place moving forward.
Yeah, and other people have noticed too. All right, let me switch gears here to a couple of cultural items here that's on our list. We're sitting here in the studios at 1240 The Brew, and right across Caddy Corner is one of the wonderful examples of Creek culture there that has been brought back to a new life. Folks, any thoughts on what we're seeing there with the council house? It's been refurbished and about done with it, I think.
Yeah, I didn't know when, I don't know if they had given any official opening or anything like that, or when they're going to have I would imagine they'll have a ceremony. I don't know that, but yeah, it's just kind of from being a resident and that lives and works and drives around in this town on a regular basis. It's pretty good looking, from an aesthetic point of view. I mean, you come through at night and it's got the LEDs, sort of now new, highlighting the top of it there, and then around accenting, and then they got the windows open, and it looks really like aesthetically on the outside they've done things. Now, I can't speak about anything on the inside. I haven't been in there. I haven't talked to anybody about it. Looking forward to that because that's something that we've not only followed but can continue to be a good story for us. So yeah, it's exciting. I think it's got to be exciting. Not John Wayne. Will Rogers. Will Rogers, he says there's only one council house. And,
oh, absolutely.
And right here.
My impression is that building now smiles. I mean, it looks happy that it's still around with us and still such an important landmark in our culture, and it looks good. I mean, it bears its age.
Right, yeah.
I still remember whenever the day that Creek Nation got this back from the city of Okmulgee. You remember that?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I mean, I wonder. I mean, the thought that comes to my mind is like, will it have that much of a turnout like that day whenever Mvskoke Creek Nation was able to get it back? I mean, I kind of hope.
I just remember I just remember not being able to get over the fact that I was so mad that we were having to pay for it. Well, I couldn't appreciate anything else besides having to pay for
$3 million.
Equate that with our last subject, though. I mean, that's a building that's been tied to the history of our self-governance and the ebb and flow of it. And here we got it back. It's getting touched up in the wake of Murphy Royal, or as that's going on too.
It's done wonders for the downtown districts here. You see a new life coming back. People are looking at refurbishing the fronts of their businesses and things and trying something that is more inviting to the community and visitors to come in and look at it. And we've got the crown jewel.
That's absolutely correct. That Main Street director, Heather Sumner, brought that up in an article. Whenever this does get going, I mean, they're wanting to, I guess, transport. I mean, have people come down from Oklahoma City. They're going to commute them down here and just have them come and spend the day and look at, take in the council house. I mean, that's their ideas and objectives, and I kind of hope so. I mean, let people from Central Oklahoma be able to see what this masterpiece is, what I like to call it, what it is.
You also have to think about, school-age children, too. They don't teach a lot about Native Americans in school, but what an opportunity the nation might have if they could get groups of school children here to teach them accurate Creek Native American history.
Well, now, wait a minute. Last I checked, they're still making paper feathers on Thanksgiving week in kindergarten classes. Well, let's not run down the schools too bad. Now they're doing their part.
They did, I think, get rid of the land rush. Anyway, let's move on to another cultural item. I think the controversy over stomp dances on tribal land has kind of been laid to rest. I haven't heard any really official declarations, but they're a case-by-case basis saying, well, I would like the festival.
Seemed to go off without a hitch. I mean, that's one of those things where when it first, and everybody can kind of attest to this, when that first came up, it was like, whoa, this is wet dynamite. You know what I mean? And there was no way, like, even just you saying it there, Gary, you were like, the supposed controversy about stomp dances on tribal land. I'm like, what? Like, what? That is a controversy, that there's a controversy about stomp dances on tribal land. And I think that what it did, though, which was, to me, like kind of the geeky, nerdy, like I'm about Creek news and like seeing developments in Creek news, is it sort of peeled back this underlying tension that had been out there for years and still exists about people that go, the stomp dances belong at the stomp grounds where they happen. These, where they go and do them inside and indoors and at other places and at a festival or at the fair or whatever, is wrong. There are people that think that, and there are also people that go, no, let's share our culture. Let's show people this beautiful part of our culture. And so you saw for the first time in the open and in public those two sides not being under the water, but being up there and fighting, like two warships, not fighting in the sense of like, physically, but there was this warring, like idealistic.
It's an open conversation of something that had been in the background. And what's interesting is, if I recall correctly, The key issue as to why that happened wasn't either of those. It was the fact that some folks were using them for fundraisers, that it was for financial benefit. And that was an interesting experiment in media and misperception, that if you go out and do this, the first question is the why, and it took us a little while to get to the why.
Yeah, and that's what's, and I'm glad he said that, because there's so many instances that we cover and we see that things are given a reason, right, for this is why we have a problem with it. But really, if you look at the true heart of the matter, there's underlying reasons as well. There's always that given, presented reasoning, or we can't have, it's a money issue. But there is that, hey, you know, if you think that there's creeks out there that do not, you know, aren't cool with stomp dances happening anywhere besides at the location of their stomp ground, you're lying to yourself. There's people that don't like that.
Yeah, and when one considers that, now we have to include the National Museum of the American Indian, where this exhibition type stomp dance was put on for visitors and the folks up there in the nation's capital. So. For those of you who have been up there and had a good time, yeah. I mean, they invited people in to enjoy it, and that's not something you can do at a powwow. It's different animal. I mean, they do it, you know, invitational kind of thing, but you know, it's not quite the same. All right, let's move on. Blood quantum reared its head once more. We saw it being connected sometimes with the Friedman issue, but the blood quantum discussion has been with us for a long time. There are some people who say you got to reduce it. Others say, nope, as a matter of fact, you probably should raise it, you know, or else it'll be a bunch of other people who aren't Creeks actually running the tribe. So you see the Cherokee Nation with Mr. Baker over there, who's only like, what, 164th, something like that? You know, that's fine, okay, you know, the Cherokees made their selection there, but for me it'll always be, well, is that enough, though? Because he's 64 or 63, 64, something else, so anyway. Any thoughts, anybody there?
We actually, since it was an election year, we took the opportunity to ask the candidates what they thought about blood quantum. You know, should it be raised? Should it be decreased? How does this affect other things? You talked last week with, or maybe not last week, the week before, with Chief Floyd, and he brought up the 47 Act. The 47 Act restricts allotments, original allotments. Their inheritance have to be 1/2 Mvskoke Creek, and no, I mean, it can't be, you know, a quarter Cherokee or a quarter Creek. They have to be half. Otherwise, they don't inherit that property in restricted status, which means it's taxable, and which means it falls out of the Creek Nation jurisdiction. Now, how that applies with Murphy and everything else remains to be seen, but. It was interesting, I think, hearing the different candidates and their perspectives on what should be done on blood quantum.
Well, especially considering to be candidates right now, they have to be a quarter. So they're talking about opening themselves up to more challenge if they support exploring loosening that requirement. I think the two key arguments you hear on either side of this issue, and let me backtrack for a second. Again, just like the stomp dance issue, this is something that's been hanging out in the background for a long time. Again, all of a sudden, it's a big public on the record conversation, which is something that's brand new. What you kind of hear on either side for the blood quantum supporting, upholding a restriction is that it's tied to culture and cultural competency. Sometimes people see it that way. On the other side, folks think, well, we may be limiting our pool of qualifications for candidates. And so it's really interesting to see that play out, and this is an issue that's not going away.
Yeah, and I'm, you know, Sterling kind of sandbagged me there, kind of stole my talking points. It's all right. Hey, we think alike on a lot of things, but, I mean, to me, the biggest issue here is that exactly what he said. I mean, we asked all those people I mean running for the candidacy in the National Council on the blood quantum issue. A lot of, just about all of them gave their opinion one way or another. You know what none of them said? None of them brought up the issue of the fact that, as Sterling said, that somehow there is this train of thought that amount of Creek blood in you dictates your cultural competency. That doesn't make any sense to me. That there is no way that that's biologically correct. I mean, I could walk out today and find somebody that was 164th that could tell me every single timeline, move, turn of events, everything in the Chitto-Harjo Rebellion, and what happened, and who did what, and what it led to, and why we're here now working under what we're working under. And speak more of the language, and then go out and find somebody that's full-blood that wouldn't be able to do either one. So my point is that it has no bearing on cultural competency. That to me, that is a dead argument.
One thing that's interesting is there's no sociological data as to how that plays out from one individual to the next. So I think a lot of folks that are on the side of the blood quantum thing think that's the safe play to ensure cultural competency on a broad scale. But honestly, as a journalist, I don't see any statistics to know one way or the other. All we can do is let folks, hash it out and print it.
Yeah, and I think this may have been brought up too, a cultural competency test for inclusion into the legislative body. Maybe so. You need to know exactly what you're dealing with and who you're dealing with and the people that you're representing. I mean, you can't run it like, I know a lot of people, some people's argument is that the Creek Nation government is fashioned just like the white man's government. It's just like the United States government, and we have the same problems, the same issues, blah, blah, blah. Well, if we started getting more towards a tie-in, or, maybe having a lot of knowledge of what we're doing, who we're representing, and the history and everything, there's a train of thought out there that maybe that would enhance that and make it better and get it away from that traditional model that we're just copying something instead of being our own true self.
And a lot of, I think everybody in this room has said this once before. I mean, in order to be an elected official, you kind of have to know both sides, tribal government and U.S. government. I mean, you have to understand both of those, because whether or not, they're saying like the U.S. government is, coming in on us. I mean, I hate to say it, but it is. I mean, we do go as far as like, and help me find the right words, guys. They got people that are running for office, and will, I guess, donate some money to their
campaign contributions.
Yeah, the campaign contributions. I mean, we do that. I mean, I know they go through a series of questions. I know during whenever I have to cover a committee, they're asking them questions, but they're still running for a state office,
Well, before we get too far away from that, like us copying them, perhaps a historical note is that they copied us. Mm-hmm. We were the ones who had the bicameral legislature, mm-hmm. even to our kinfolk way over on the East Coast. I mean, they had what essentially amounted to a House of Kings and a House of Warriors. And women could vote and sit on war councils and things like that. So it's odd that we've come like this.
Imagine that, women with a voice.
Mm-hmm. Oh, boy, you got a nice voice. Do you? How we've come, the full circle there. And we're now in that position. Okay, voice, go ahead.
I think it amazes me. We talk about the voice of women, in the legislative branch and having a voice in voting, and you tie it back to what's going on nationally with the sexual harassment and assault issue. What was it? Times Person of the Year was women. Isn't that what it was?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So
Trump thought it was going to be him. Yeah. Oh, it'll probably be me, but guess what, sucker? Okay, now let's Friedman. Let's touch on that in the last few minutes that we've got here. We've seen, of course, the legal support for the Cherokee case for their freemen there, and they were mentioned in the treaties and things, and therefore, legally, they can be members. And then we've had Mvskoke version of that going on for some time. That kind of sitting in a wait-and-see kind of position. We haven't heard them yet, but we haven't also never heard anything really from the administration about what are you going to do if this illegal case is upheld.
I think in the administration's case, it's a smart move probably to not to say anything until there's a little bit more out there and a more clear-cut direction for them to follow on this, because it's a very polarizing topic amongst the citizenry, for sure. You're dealing with a lot of the same type of arguments in blood quantum debate, such as, let's just Cliff's Notes the argument right now. It's like, there ain't enough creek to their creek, and so with the Freedmen issue, it's something that we've saw the Cherokee Nation for years kind of take this staunch stance on, and now we've seen it changed a little bit. You obviously have to look at our situation and go, where do we go from here? Not only did it change for them, but I would also probably speculate that it empowered the Creek Freedmen cause a little bit to we may be almost there. We need to keep going. We need to ramp up our ability to be seen, heard, and so you could look for that in the new year, and obviously with that, looking to a response from the tribe on a tribal level. And another thing we don't talk about too is maybe that how the Cherokee Freedmen ruling affects Creek Nation, and who do we see in our health facilities, in our IHS health facilities, so those are things to think about as we go forward with this issue.
Yeah, well, it sets a legal precedent,
yes.
So it could be followed very quickly.
Yeah, and one thing the chief said when he was on the program, if I saw that correctly, that some of the language, although people think all the 5 tribe treaties are roughly the same in 1866, that some of the language is different. I don't know what he means on that, and obviously he didn't elaborate for reasons possibly that Jason pointed out. But, so far the precedent is there on the Cherokee side to explore, but we haven't really seen a lot of formal action yet from anyone in Creek Nation. It's a very historically complex issue, and honestly, just like Murphy Royal, when we do get a little more action on it, it's going to be something that really tests our resources.
Okay, let's switch to some of the tribal business dealings. We did a story on the council passing almost $100,000 for maintenance of the country club, which is still sitting there, kind of growing weeds, and we're spending, $30,000, $50,000 a month to maintain it.
They're about to start calling it the Out in the Country Club.
We have not heard any plans, although there have been kind of promises made that we're going to tell you what we're going to do with it and maybe even sell it. It ain't been sold so far, and nothing else has happened except they're maintaining it. So there's a scheme there that it's possibly some sort of business viable kind of thing, whether it's just the real estate.
And that's kind of what we heard from Chief during your interview with him, Gary, was this was considered as part of it's not the strategic plan. What's the word I'm looking for?
Master plan?
The master plan, yes. It's been considered as part of the master plan. Now, what this group is doing, from what I can tell and what Chief said, they may have some ideas for how we handle this property in the future, whether it is to sell it or whether it's to revamp it or open a business or what exactly we're going to be doing there.
That's chicken.
Hope it isn't a restaurant. I mean, lost $30,000 a month for that.
Right.
Anyway, also included in the business dealings, Riverwalk. Should we sell it? Is it starting to pay off now?
Well, that's what's interesting for us, and was a pretty cool little get. Was during the candidate profiles and on video, on record, we had 2 national councilmen saying that they think we should sell it. That's pretty cool. I mean, as far as getting some news and actually getting a side of something rather than just get kind of coach speak from a couple of national councilmen. So we do know that there is a little bit of an opinion on the place one way or another, which is always good because that gives you direction. And for us, that's been a place and sort of an area that's been without a little bit of direction. There's been places that have gone in there and they've tried an anchor tenant, and we've seen more businesses go into the facility. Do we know yet if it's profitable for the nation? No. Do we even know yet, specifically if One Fire Holdings and those people that are running the area and things like that and have been called to invest in business and bring people in there, if it's being profitable? We really don't know that yet either, because we haven't really gotten any specific looks at financials and everything like that. I will tell everybody out there, I did reach out today by text to Mike Payne, who is the One Fire CEO, to get him on camera to talk with us a little bit about the kind of year that they had. And maybe we'll be able to shed a little bit of light on Riverwalk and get his opinion on what a couple of council members said about selling it. Wonder what he thinks about that.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm interested in that, I know a lot of people probably are too.
Right.
So let's get him to talk about that a little bit too, maybe. And so, we'll see. I hope you text me back. It'll be an interesting interview.
We do too, because that's a positive, because I'm so far on the negative on people getting back with me.
Oh, yeah. It's tough.
It's really bothering
tough
me
right now. Yeah.
Well,
Nobody wants to go back to work.
You guys remember I wrote on both of those, and really a lot of these issues started around spring 2012. And here we are still talking about it.
Yeah, and really too much in the same way we were then.
Okay. We've got about 4.5 minutes left. What do you think? Looking back over 2017, what kind of year was it? Can you do it in 45 seconds apiece?
Well, it was both very fast and slow in the moment. It was just so busy and dynamic and setting us up for some very interesting things this year, as we've just talked about. All I can say is it's set a stage for me to be very intrigued about the road we have ahead this year.
Okay.
It's opening doors to what, a lot of what we're going to be covering here within the next couple of months. I mean, I'm going to say the first 6 months. I mean, it's kind of gearing us up for our the latter part, which is like we normally deal with festival, but we're going to be pretty busy just getting ready for everything else. I mean, getting when we hear the answers from that.
I think it's exciting in the fact that we're seeing more people expect an expectation of Mvskoke Media for what it really should be, which is an independent news media, and getting answers to the kind of questions that they haven't been used to before. But now that they're having access and they're getting those questions to their officials, and they're seeing an effort to get answers that maybe in the past wouldn't have been given. There's almost like a newness and an excitement. It's like they're not ready to just like jump on the surface with it, but like there's this underlying like, oh, okay, I'm going to watch this video. Maybe I won't trumpet my cause, but I'm going to watch this video and be informed, and that's what's been exciting for me.
I'm going to use a word that my colleagues here are going to get a kick out of because I use it all the time. But this past year's been interesting.
It's a neutral word.
Yeah, it's been interesting. So I'm excited for this upcoming year and what Mvskoke Media holds.
All right, folks, that's our look at 2017. Yes, it was a lot of a roller coaster year for us. But I, as the old man in the studio, or excuse me, on the team, I think I'm pretty proud of it. I've seen our crew season and mature, and then we're cross-referencing our materials together, so one story doesn't stay with one medium; it gets kicked around in a lot of different ways to approach it. Let me knock out a couple real quick announcements here, and we'll be out of here. First of all, we wanted to remind you that the Red Stick Gallery downtown is open Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 4:30, and it's still a wonderful place to get gifts for your family. We wanted to read that before Christmas, but we got caught up in a crazy schedule. At-large quarterly meeting is coming up January 19th from 10 to 2, the OKC Mvskoke Creek Association in Oklahoma City. That's it. That's all we can do with it. Gary Fife saying, Joe, Jeff Gadosmado, Bumblehead just got. We have.
Keep talking.
Okay.
Keep talking.
Keep talking. That's
Hold
easy.
on, Carrie. I'm going to rescue you.
Thank you.
I'm just
Okay.
kidding. No, I'm just kidding.
Anybody else? Thanks, folks.
What about the news?
We've come together as a team. How about
Yes. And we've gotten past the craziness in our schedule, I hope, so we can settle down and talk about some things in a more cohesive manner. Anyway, to heck with it. If you want to hear rock and roll, let's go back to it. Say Mado, Bumblehead just got. You've been listening to Mvskoke Radio. Join us again next week for more local, tribal, and community news and updates. Mado.